Now on that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all the things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place here these days?" He asked them, "What things?" They replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things took place. And moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women said, but they did not see him." Then he said to them, "O foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer before entering into his glory?" As they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on further, but they urged him strongly, saying, "Abide with us, for it is evening, and the day is far spent." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. And then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him. And he vanished from their sight. They said to one another, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" And so that same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem. They told what had happened on the road and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of bread. Let us bow. O God, grant us in the midst of life, its troubles and trials, its concerns and cares, new faith, faith that may be to us health and life and joy. In the Spirit of Jesus, Amen. I believe that someday in a realm quite beyond this one, a realm we can neither conceive of nor comprehend, a realm beyond our wildest dreams, you and I, and those to whom we've said goodbye, shall meet and know and grow again, a realm where all the sufferings and agonies of this life shall seem brief and small, a realm where all the evil and injustice of this world shall be set right, a realm where all those who've run the race well shall know reward, a realm where God shall finally be God and shall reign. I didn't always believe it, and there are days even now when I admit I find it not easy, when the late news tells of armies raping their way across the land, or I watch children limp along a hospital corridor, or I know of a young person wasting her life away, or I watch as a loved one slips into the night. I struggle like everyone else does to hold this faith and this day. But I tell you, I've learned over the years not to take the moods that this world stirs in me too seriously, and to turn again to where this faith was born, to the stories of this Easter day. For if you ask why I believe, I'm inclined to answer because I've found some old stories. Or rather, to be very honest, they found me long before a critical mind and exposure to the acids of modernity eroded their power. I heard them as but a child, and I learned to dream their dream and sing their song. But then, of course, with the years and sophistication and a few degrees and a few tears, they lost their grip and slipped away into the category nice but not very credible, like all the rest of the children's stories did. But I came back to them as a young man because I discovered that without them there's not much else worth really living for, let alone to preach of a Sunday morning, because they're not stories made up in a corner. They're memories of a whole community down through time to which I belong. And they have made me and you and our life together and our story as a people, and there is no way for us without them, no future, no hope, no life. And they have that about them which we can believe and even sing about on this and other Easter Sunday in April. My favorite story is the story of these two who are heading home to Emmaus. Now, I know that Luke has shaped the story a bit to his own ends, and there is theology here as well as event. But who would make up such a tale? A good, proper storyteller would not let two strangers just drop in on us from nowhere and then not even give us the name of one of them. A good storyteller would say Cleopas and Heinrich or Charlie. And these are not even central figures in the drama, not one of the 12 or two of the 12, just side characters trudging down from Jerusalem the 7 miles west toward the setting sun and home. And in fact, like the sun, their lives are setting also, settling into deep discouragement and despair and hopelessness, because a man they'd bet their lives on, invested with high hopes, a man they'd given their all for, was dead, gone. They thought they'd found a leader who could stand up to their enemies, liberate their land, bring back some measure of prosperity and peace, generate meaning and future for them all, but he is dead. With the wave of a hand, Rome, fate, bad timing, political maneuvers had wiped it all out in one dark, agonizing moment against a Friday sky, and he is dead, and they know it. And we've all been there. A mother stands over the lifeless body of her child caught in gang crossfire this week. A man sits silent and stunned as a young internist tries gently to administer the death sentence. The roof falls in on Georgia folk at prayer. Asian parents descend from the plane to claim their sons' bodies. The road to Emmaus is a long road that runs through the homes and neighborhoods and bazaars and shopping centers, down through time and all over this world, the road of depression and despair and defeat, of everything that we human beings cherish and hold dear. We've all walked with those two toward the setting sun. But their problem is not just that he is dead. Their problem is what they know, for sure. Their problem is what they know this death must mean. They know that this death must mean the end, defeat of all reason to hope or care or believe. We had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Good man that he was, he clearly was not from God. Because they knew what God was like and where you could spot him in the lives of human beings. Everybody knew it. Everybody in that day knew it. From the age of Abraham on, they knew it. God was with you. You could tell it when he blessed you with long and healthy life and lots of children and grandchildren and with prosperity and power. Sounds a little naive perhaps, but I think we all tend to read our lives that way. As long as things go well, it's not hard to believe and feel blessed by God. God's in his heaven, all's right with the world, but let the health break down, or the pink slip arrive, or the spouse walk out, or the child fall. That's when we ask, where is God? Is God? I know a woman who has never darkened the door of this church since her son died suddenly many, many years ago. Why? She is certain that God deserted her or abandoned her, if he exists at all. And here's a Messiah who ends up dead at 30 with no heirs, in powerlessness and disgrace. He may have been a nice guy, but God clearly was not with him. Of that they are utterly clear. There are those in this over-psychologized age, who argue that my stories represent some kind of wish fulfillment. These poor fellows are so stunned and shocked by his death so unable to come to terms with it that they project their shattered hopes on the screen of fantasy, and they invent the idea of Jesus' resurrection as a way of coping with cruelly broken dreams. And that has an initial apparent psychological plausibility, especially to people who've read a lot of pop psychology. But it won't work as a serious reading of the stories. They simply did not have the mindset in that day for that kind of psychological trick. We know about a lot of messianic movements in the Jewish world, roughly contemporary with Jesus. And in many cases, the leader dies a violent death at the hands of the authorities. And not in one case do you ever hear the slightest mention of disappointed followers claiming that their hero had been raised from the dead. They knew better. Disastrous death on the one hand and Almighty God on the other hand do not go together. Never. And if you heard the story, not even the rumors that some women had found an empty tomb could budge them from what they know. They do not see because it cannot be. And we have the same problem in our time, perhaps even more so. Many of the more intelligent among us, quite frankly, smile in superior fashion at the credulity of so many on this day. And lurking beneath the wistful belief of many, there is a sinking, somber thought that we may be grasping at straws because of what we know for sure. To be sure, rarely do we give up entirely. Johnny Carson, some time ago, visited Harvard University to receive an award, and after the ceremony, he agreed to answer some questions from the press, and one reporter asked, "What would you like to have inscribed on your tombstone?" And Carson thought for a moment, and then he said that the words he would like on his tombstone are the words he had used down through his career before every commercial break. "I'll be right back." But Neil Postman of New York University has written some words about us which I think are profoundly true. He writes, "As the spectacular triumphs of technology have mounted, something else has happened to us. Old sources of belief have come under siege, and we find it less and less possible to believe with vibrant faith. Nietzsche announced that God was dead. Darwin didn't go quite that far, but did make it clear that if we were children of God, we had come to be so through a much longer and less dignified route than we had imagined, and that in the process we had picked up some strange and unseemly relatives. Marx argued that history has its own agenda and was taking us where it would, irrespective of what we wanted. Freud taught us that we had no understanding of our deepest needs and could not trust our traditional ways of thinking. John Watson, founder of behaviorism, showed that free will was an illusion and that our behavior in the end was not unlike that of the pigeons. Einstein and his colleagues told us that there were no absolute means of judging anything in any case, and everything is relative. The thrust of a century of intellectual effort has had the effect of making us lose confidence in our beliefs and therefore in ourselves." Now, of course, most Americans have not read Nietzsche, nor Darwin, nor Marx, nor Freud, nor Einstein, and some don't even know the names. But as Lord Acton once wrote, ideas have a life of their own, and once into the bloodstream of a culture, they infect widely without the infected even knowing where they came from. So, for example, a young man in confirmation class can write, "I do not believe that God created man." He could imagine me reading this. "I do not believe God created man, but that man created God." Now, I dare say that young fellow has never heard of Freud or Feuerbach, but somewhere along the line, somebody taught him to think this way, or we've got a budding genius on our hands. So ours has become a culture of suspicion in which we know, or think we know, that religion is mostly a projection of our own needs, that morality is a matter of opinion, and that life after death is the refuge of the weak and scared. And the response of many to this day becomes that of the bright young man a few years ago who, after Easter service, greeted me at the door, shook my hand, smiled, and said wistfully, "I sure wish it could be true." In passing, we need to face the fact also that it's all or nothing today. The conviction of this day cannot be segregated from all the other important convictions of life. Easter is not an add-on, an appendix. If there is no victory over death, then God is either a monster or a myth, and morality is mere opinion. A young man who died in World War I left this behind in his papers. If it be all for naught, for nothingness, at last, why does God make the world so fair? Why spill this golden splendor out across the western hills and light the silver lamp of Eve? Why give me eyes to see and soul to love so strong and deep? Why set this hunger for eternity to gnaw my heartstrings through if death ends all? If death ends all, then evil must be good, wrong must be right, and beauty ugliness. And God is a Judas who betrays his son and with a kiss damns all the world to hell if Christ rose not. Exactly. But they do not see because it cannot be. Not even the arguments from their own tradition by this stranger on the road really shakes them from what they know they know. And things only begin to change for them and their world when they make a different kind of move. A move from their heads and what they are so sure they know to their hearts and what they still love. The unknown stranger is about to go on when they make a gesture that they had just recently learned. You have to understand that in that time and culture, you didn't offer an evening meal to just anyone. Table fellowship was a gesture of love that you reserved only for your own kind and kin. But from their lost leader, they had nevertheless learned one thing. They had learned to do differently. They had learned to offer themselves and their table generously and in love to almost anyone, and so why not this stranger? And the text says, they urge him strongly, abide with us, it's evening, the day is far spent, and so he stays. And when he is at table with them, he takes bread and he blesses it, and he breaks it, and he shares it, and their eyes are opened, and they know who he is. They know. Is it possible that love can know something that is unavailable to the research lab or the disembodied intellect, arid and dry? Madeleine L'Engle's little book, The Summer of the Great-Grandmother, she tells of being with her grandchildren at bedtime for reading and song, and her grandchild Lena turns to her suddenly and says, "Is everything all right?" And she says, "Yes, of course, everything's all right." And Lena persists, "Gram, is everything really all right? I mean, really?" And L'Engle says she looked down at that little child in her white nightgown and realized that she was asking the cosmic question, the question that is out beyond the safety of home, full of light and love and warmth. Every Christmas, she comments, we come to the manger child and ask the same question, don't we? Is everything really all right? And every Easter, we come to the tomb and ask the same question, is everything really all right? Is Grams only trying to reassure a little one who is too immature to face reality? Or does Grams know something, really know something? Yes, Lena, everything is really all right. You see, what the mind could not entertain in those two strangers, love discovered. Reality was not at all what they knew they knew. In the presence of that crucified Lord, alive, breaking bread right there in front of them, they learned that the sufferings and setbacks, the struggles and contradictions, the crosses of this world are not the sign of God's absence, but precisely where he is most powerfully at work, giving courage and strength and hope. And in the presence of that crucified Lord, alive and breaking bread with them right there before them, they learn that this life is not the end, but the beginning, that a whole new world awaits out beyond. The resurrection, mark you, is not about continuation of life in our kind of world, in our kind of way. It's not about return or reincarnation. I'm always a bit amused at how Westerners manage to find hope and consolation in the idea of reincarnation, whereas in the Eastern religions of its origin, it is in fact a form of punishment. You mean I got to go through this garbage again and again and again until I get it right? There's a story about the woman who went to her spiritualist to see if she could contact her dead husband. The spiritualist went into a trance, and soon a voice was heard, "Mary, are you there?" The woman was overjoyed. "Elwood, is it really you? Are you all right?" "I'm fine, I'm fine." "Is it nice there, dear?" "Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Blue sky, pure air, green grass. And the chickens, Mary. You've never seen such beautiful chickens." "Elwood, where are you?" "Chickens in heaven?" "Who's talking about heaven? I'm a rooster in Iowa." Fact is, as we too welcome this stranger in love, as we trust God and life in spite of our doubts, the assurance comes that we are never alone, that even in the darkest hour, He is there. The assurance comes that even in death, we have nothing to fear. Everything is really all right. Tom Dooley, young physician who organized hospitals, maybe you remember him, he raised money, he poured out his life in the service of Southeast Asia. Here was a man whose deep relationship with God led him to abandon an easy way for a desperately difficult ministry. A relationship with his God that enabled him to live and die victoriously, if at the age of 34. Here's the letter he wrote on December 1st, 1960, to the president of Notre Dame, his alma mater. "Dear Father Hesburgh, they've got me down again, flat on the back with plaster and bags and hot water bottles. I have contrived a way of pumping the bed up a bit so that with a long reach I can get to my typewriter. Two things prompt this note to you. The first is I've discovered that whenever my cancer acts up a bit, and it certainly is acting up now, I find I can turn within. And less do I think about my hospitals around the world, or the 94 doctors, or the fundraisers, or that sort of thing, and more do I find myself thinking about the one divine doctor and my personal fund of His grace. It's become pretty definite that the cancer has spread to the lumbar vertebra, accounting for all the back problems over the last 2 months. And I have monstrous phantoms at times, I'm sure all men do, inside and outside the wind blows. But then the time comes, like now, when the storm around me no longer matters, and the winds within me subside, and nothing human or earthly can touch me, and a peace gathers in my heart, and what seems unpossessable I can possess, and what seems unfathomable I can fathom, and what is unutterable I can utter. How do people endure anything on earth if they do not have God with them in the midst of their troubles and a deep, eternal hope? Indeed, how do they? So they know Him in the breaking of bread, and that same hour, in the middle of the night, they get up and they hit the road running. But this time with a song on their lips and a stride toward Jerusalem and the new day about to come. My friends, the road is still there from Jerusalem to Emmaus, but I think it's become the longest road in the world, and I think the real question is, which way shall we run? May I invite you to run east with me, singing.